Hi everybody and welcome to a new EMnify webinar. Today I will talk about the EMnify REST API. Before I start and while we are waiting for the last attendees to join, can you please let me know if you can hear me well using the question panel, and also let me know if you can see my screen. You should see a keyboard and EMnify webinar, etc. So if you can hear me and see my screen, please say yes or something in the question panel. Thank you very much, Eric. Awesome. So, hi everybody. My name is Jean-Eudes Ambroise. I have been working as a customer success manager at EMnify for more than a year now. And today I am very happy to explain to you how the EMnify REST API works. Before I jump into the subject, I will tell you a bit more about the advantages of the API, how you can use them. Then I will tell you a bit more about the EMnify documentation. Then we'll take a look at the authentication procedure, which is very important to understand so that your API can work perfectly. And finally, we will do a few examples using Swagger, which is the API documentation, and especially Postman, which is another tool that we very much like to use at EMnify to make several API calls at the same time. And finally, we'll have the possibility to ask questions. Regarding the questions, quick information, some of you have already found the question panel, which is great. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask. I will either answer them directly or at the end. Also use this panel to mention any audio issue or technical issue you may have. It has happened in the past that the audio was not the best. So if this happens, I will just stop, fix something, and get back to it. Very good. So the API. So what are the advantages of the EMnify API and why you should use them? So according to me, there are two main advantages. The first one is to overcome some limitations we may have on the EMnify user interface. I will talk about this in a few minutes. And the other one is why you would use any API is to make third-party integration. So the EMnify solution gives a lot of information regarding the connectivity of your devices, information about your SIMs. You have the possibility to activate, suspend, enable, disable, all through the EMnify user interface. And everything you can do through the EUI, you can do via API. And by integrating this, you can enable your customers to have access to all those features, enabling you to resell better and integrate the whole capabilities of our solution in your offering. So if I take a look at the EMnify user interface, this is my webinar test account. I don't have much on it, but for example, I have 3 suspended SIMs. As we mentioned during previous webinars, in order to use my SIM cards, I need to first activate them and I need to create an endpoint. If I want to use all 3 SIM cards right away, I would need to select the SIM card, activate it, and then go to the next one, select it, activate it, and so on. Same thing if I want to suspend it. I have to select it and suspend. Basically, we don't have mass management solutions. Mass management possibilities are not offered by the EMnify user interface. So using the API is a good way to do mass management, which can be definitely very useful if you have, like we hope you will, more than 3 SIMs. Other possible limitations, we are an API first company, so we develop features and they are at the beginning only available via API. It is the case, for example, for quota management. As it says under my service profile, if I want to use this, I need to integrate the API. last but not least, if I want to add more than 5 IP address spaces, I will eventually need to integrate the API. So for all those reasons, and in order to use the EMnify solution even better, the API is very useful. So how can I use the API? Well, we got you covered. We have a very well done documentation, which is hosted and based on Swagger, which is the industry standard API documentation tool. It is open source, and a lot of companies have started using it. It became the industry standard, and now it's offering more than only documentation. We have a very useful feature, which is read and try, which I will show right away. It will enable us to directly try the API while reading it. And as it is the industry standard, a lot of people of the community are developing third-party tools to integrate with it. And you have a huge amount of forums explaining to you how to use this documentation in the proper way. So that's why we chose Swagger. And this is how you can understand how the API works. So very easily, everything you can do from the EMnify user interface, you can do via API. So all the API calls available are to be seen here. And each time you click on it, you see how to use the API, how to perform it, and what kind of information you need to put into in order to make it work. Two things are very important regarding the API. Those are the authentication, about which I will talk in a few minutes, and the content type. So we are sticking to the industry standard. It's REST API, very standardized, and we are using JSON. So we will see when I do examples using the tool Postman, I will each time have to explain in my headers, the content type is application JSON, and I will have to authenticate each time as well. So let's see how the authentication works. So basically, as a customer of EMnify, you have an account and your user, which has access to the EMnify server, EMnify user interface, and you can authenticate with your credentials. What you want to do, you want to give access to your application. You want your application to be able to use the EMnify solution possibilities. You could create one credential per application or one credential only for all your applications, but first it's not very secure to have your credentials on specific applications. And then if you want to revoke them all, it's hard to find out which user you should delete. For this, the standard is to use what we call API key or application token. So how does it work? As a user connected on the EMnify user interface, you will create an API key, and the EMnify server will give it to you. This is basically the credentials of your application. So you have to put it on your application, and thanks to this API key, your application will be able to request an authentication token. It will receive it, and using this authentication token, it will be able to authenticate. And once it is authenticated, you will be able to use the API with this token for the next 240 minutes. So the authentication token is valid for a limited amount of time. A bit like when you are logged in on your account, after a while you are logged out and you need to connect again. This is the same thing with the API key. You need to renew your authentication token in order for your application to use the APIs again. How does it look? Well, this is quite easy. When you are on the EMnify user interface, you click on the link button. And, okay, I was already there. You click on create application token. Give it a precise purpose because thanks to this purpose, you will understand later why you created this token and if you should delete it or keep it. So in this case, I will call it webinar API token. I create the application token. So what we call application token at EMnify is this API key. I click on it and it says in red, warning, please store it in a secure place because we only show it once. And if you don't save it and paste it, basically you will never find it again. No worries, if you didn't save it, you can always revoke it like this. Okay, it's gone and I can create it again. Let's do it again. Webinar API token. So I will take it and for the moment save it in my text editor and say okay. Why should I revoke it? Well, basically, if I take my slides again, if I don't want my application to use the API anymore, I simply revoke the API key. Server says okay. When the application requests a new authentication token, it will be refused and the application cannot use the API anymore. So the question now is, how can my application get the authentication token? Well, let's take a look at the documentation. So let's go back to Swagger, which is here. And I have the API authentication. As I said, the very useful thing with Swagger is that you can try the APIs directly. So we just click on try it out. And here I have the API body, which is a post authenticate. And here, instead of this application token example, I will take mine and put it here and execute it. If it all works well and we didn't make any mistake, it should answer OK 200 and give me the authentication token, which I will be able to copy and paste in order to authenticate. So I will copy that. Regarding the format, as I said, it's JSON and it's very sensitive. So if we forget just one thing, for example, this quotes, and I click on execute, it will not work. Code 400 didn't work. Basically, it is quite sensitive. It is very easy to make a mistake. If you are beginning with API, you will for sure make mistakes. You will be sure that the code is correct, but you will just forget one little thing, and then you will spend 2 hours trying to find out why you had a problem. That's why be careful with the documentation, copy paste instead of writing at the beginning, and then everything will be fine. So I have received my authentication token, which I will use here. The lock is open. I will paste my authentication token here. I click on authorize. And as I can see, I am authorized. The lock is closed. In order to see if I am definitely authenticated, I can simply try to request the list of SIMs I have on my account. So let's look for SIMs API. So what I will do is basically try via API to get the same information as when I click on SIM, try to find this list. List SIMs, this seems to be the right one. It's a get API. Basically, there is no body inside. I can click on try it out here, execute, and if everything went well, I should have my list of SIMs. As I said, here is the list of SIMs. So 1, 2, and 3, which is the same as I had here. What else can I do? Well, as I said, if I want to have more than 5 IP ranges, at one point I need to use the API. So how can I do this? This is always useful to know. Let's look for IP ranges. Okay, IP address spaces. What I need to do is add another one by using the put, and I need to enter a specific ID. if I click on get a random address space, it will give to me the possible IP address spaces I can use. So I click on execute. And here I see the list of IP address spaces that I can add to my account. I take the ID. Basically, every time you have an ID on the EMnify user interface, it is in order for you to use the API. I take the ID, I copy it, and I can put it here. I click on try it out. I enter the ID I just found, click on execute. If everything works well, I should have a code 204. Usually when the code starts with 2.0 something, it's a good sign. If it's 40 something, it's a bad sign. So 20 something is good. Let's take a look at the link. And I have another IP address space with the ID I just added. It's working. So as you can see, the API documentation based on Swagger really helps you directly test the API we have and do some quick actions with it. However, if you do want to make some mass management systems, we recommend you to use Postman. And in order to do so, we have created a few articles on our knowledge base. So on support.emnify.com, if you go to the category API, we have documentation about Swagger, an introduction to Postman, which is the tool I'm going to use right now, and other types of articles. So let's take a look at this article, which is the first one I will use when making API calls with Postman. How to use an application token, so API key, to get my API authentication. So basically, I have my Postman software here, which will enable me to make not only one API call in a row, but several. The first thing we need to do is to create an environment in which I will be able to create variables. So I click on this little gear, I click add, and enter the environment webinar. The first variable I can create is the API key variable, which will enable me to save my API key I just created in a secure place. I put it here and add it. So now each time I want to use my API key, instead of copy and pasting it again, I can simply use this new variable I just created. Then I need to create a collection. A collection is basically a folder in which I will add all my API calls. I add a new collection and I will call it Authentication. Create. And now what I have to do is follow the article I just showed you and make this API call. So the API URL is this one. I will take it. It is obviously the same as I have in the documentation, which is here. Not this one, sorry. Which is here. It says only /API /v1, etc. But you should never forget to put the server first. So, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, a post. So let's put a post and enter the URL. I'm gonna save and add it to my authentication collection, and I will call it retrieve auth token. Save to authentication. Okay, so I have my first API call saved in the authentication collection. Another thing I need to do, as I said in my presentation earlier, in each API call, I need to add the information, what kind of content it is. In our case, it is application JSON. So in the headers, I will enter content type and add application JSON. In each other application, in each other API call, I would have to add another header, which is the authentication header, using the authentication token I will create right now. But as in this API call, I am creating it, I cannot use it yet. And finally, I need to add the body, which will be, as I said, application JSON. So let's take the body in Swagger. I want to try it out again, or I can just take this one here. As I said, be careful when you're copy pasting. You can make mistakes. There are some tools online to validate your JSON in the browser, but try to copy paste in the right way from the beginning, in order not to lose too much time. So we'll see. It's live demonstration right now. So if I'm lucky, I don't make any mistakes and it all runs smoothly. If I'm not, well, we have to find where the problem comes from. So this is not my application JSON. As I said, I can either copy and paste my application here, but I created an API key variable, which I will copy and paste between curly brackets. So I add two curly brackets, they're closed, and I paste it here. All right, I save, and if I did everything correctly, when I sending, I should get my authentication token. Here it is. All went well. So now I can use this authentication token to make any other API calls. So as I said, we can use Postman to make several API calls at once. Let's try to activate all the SIMs at once. I will add a new collection, call it SIM. I create it. And I will try to look for the SIM list. I'm going to close this one in order to find it easier. Okay, list SIMs. So basically, I just have to do this get. I will add a new API call. It's a get. I still need to put the server, but it's not v1 authenticate. It is v1 SIM. I need to add my headers. So as I said, the content type header, which is application JSON. And in this case, I do need to authorize with the authentication token. I enter authorize, I put the bearer, and I need to copy paste this here. All right, let's try it, send. Here is my list of SIM cards. So it worked well. However, you understood that in 240 minutes, I will have to make the same API call to retrieve my authentication token from this API, copy and paste it here. So it would be much easier in this case as well to create a variable. How can I do so? Well, in the retrieve authentication token API, what we can do is tell the system to create a variable based on the result of the API. So what I want him to do is take the result of auth token and create a variable. To do so, we can add an information written in JavaScript in tests. If you don't know JavaScript, it's not a big deal. You can simply take a look at our documentation, and we have everything prepared. So I will simply take this information, which is available on our knowledge base. I enter here, and what it says is what you find, the data you find in what you call auth token. So this, please create a variable called auth token, written like this. So if I say first and then send, I have my authentication token here. And if I take a look at my environment, I have a new variable created. So now what I can do, instead of always copy and pasting my authentication token, I can simply remove all that and enter my newly created variable. And when I send, I can still authenticate and get the same lists. Okay. However, it still does not enable me to activate all my SIM cards at once. So how can I do so? Well, for that, we also have, luckily, another article called How Can I Activate Suspend SIMs via API? And it's based on Postman, and I will use it right away. So the API call is the patch, and I have to put the SIM with the SIM ID, which we can also find here, which is update a SIM, and it always works with SIM ID. All right, so I'm just going to take this API call, and instead of doing a get, I will use a patch. It's a patch, and instead of putting SIM here, I will take the SIM ID, which is here, enter it there, and save. I will call it SIM update, and I will save it not in authentication, but in the SIM collection. All right. So now I only need to take the body of my API, which is this one, and enter it here. Oops. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to delete that. Okay, this is not the right one. Raw. Okay. Paste. Okay. We have different status, 1 to 4 basically. 1 being SIM is activated, 2 is SIM suspended. All my SIMs are currently suspended, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they are. And so I want to activate the SIM ID 333016. Status ID 1, which will enable me to activate this SIM. Let's send it and see what happens. Okay, something didn't go wrong, didn't go properly. So we have to find out what went wrong, basically. So length required, something didn't go as planned. So there's probably a mistake in the API JSON that we wrote, or a mistake in the EMnify SIM ID. So let's check the SIM ID 333016. All right, the header should be correct. And we simply need to check I'm going to again copy this one, copy, add it here, paste, and put the right EMnify ID. All right, so this is correct. The authorization seems to be also correct. We can, just in case, resend the we get the authentication token and check the SIM update. We'll save it and send it. Okay, it's not a status 4 or something, it's a 2 or something. As I said, good news. And if I refresh the page, this specific SIM card should now be activated. All right, it is activated as we can see here. Now we can do the same reverse basically and deactivate it by putting a 2. We send, and it's now deactivated. It is deactivated. Okay, so yeah, the problem was probably that the SIM information was missing. As I said, it's very easy to make a small mistake. Just be patient, look at your code, look at your API, and you should be able to find the right information. So now let's try to activate, because it's better to activate, all 3 SIMs at once. How can I do so? Well, the first thing you need to do is create a CSV file with all your SIM IDs. So I created it already. I have my SIM IDs, 1, 2, 3 SIMs. And I need now to create a variable called SIM ID and tell Postman, basically, I will not enter a specific number here, but I will feed you with my CSV file, and based on the information in the CSV file, take the SIM ID and activate them. So what I will do is create a variable here between curly brackets, but I still need to define what this SIM ID is. We can do it again with JavaScript, not in tests, because test will be the result of the API. But right now we want to take the information given in the CSV file. So it's actually the pre-request script. Once again, if you don't know how to do this, we have everything you need in the documentation. And we just need to look for the prerequisite script, which is here, and it will tell Postman, take the information called SIM ID in this CSV file. So I take it, I will copy it, go to my Postman, add it to my pre-request script, paste it, and save. So my headers are still good, we just tested them. My body is also good. I don't want status 2, however, I want status 1 because I want to activate the SIMs. Save. And I have defined this new variable called SIM ID. It says unresolved variable because it is not defined in this environment yet. All right, so clicking send here will not do anything. Bad request, starting with 4, bad news. I need to use the Postman function called runner. So runner enables me to run either one API call as many times as I want, or several API calls within one collection. So if I take collection SIM, for example, I could put a list of ICC-IDs, tell with the first API, find the SIM ID based on the SIM ICC ID, and on the second API call, suspend or activate all those SIM IDs. In this case, I have only one. However, I will do this for 3 SIMs. I selected my collection SIM. I am choosing the environment webinar, I have only one, and I'm selecting a file, which is the SIM ID file. I open it, and it directly detects that I have 3 iterations. Let's preview it to make sure it's working. Iteration 1, 2, 3, SIM ID 1, 2, 3. Everything seems to be correct. If the preview doesn't look like a preview, basically, if you have something that doesn't look like the file you created, it happens if you use Excel, for example, you need to redo it, otherwise it will not work. Okay, everything seems to be correct. One last thing, if you actually do this for more than 3 SIMs, but let's say 500 or more, please put some delay so that you don't flood our server with a lot of API calls. So let's put 50 milliseconds, and I'm gonna run the collection called sim. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 iterations, 204 no content, starts with a 2, sounds good. Let's take a look at my account. And I refresh it, and I have my 3 SIMs which are activated. I could use the same technique to take those SIM cards and create endpoints out of it. For this, we have the article knowledge base called How to Create Multiple Endpoints via API. And I will not show it to you live right now. What I suggest is if you want to start using the API, I will send you the recording, of course, the slides I have, and the different links which are available on my, where is it? On my slides. Here are all the links. So if you want to start using the API, I suggest you try to do what I just did and try to create several endpoints at once with or without SIMs. It's a good training, and it will show you if you understood it or not. I'm done. So if you have any questions, just go ahead. If you have a very long question, I can activate your microphone. And while you are thinking of interesting questions to ask, I can make advertisement for our next webinar, which will be presented by Christian Henke, which is our head of product here at EMnify. He will talk about low power wide area networks, explain what the technology is, what benefits you can take out of them, give some clear use cases, etc., etc. So in the follow-up email you will receive from me, I will send a link to this webinar. Feel free to log in, to register, and to learn more about these new technologies. Okay, I don't see any questions. It's a good sign, I guess. It was very clear. If you want to follow up, I will send you an email anyway. My email is ja@emnify.com, and feel free to just contact me to have tips around our API. Thank you very much for taking part in this webinar. One last thing, you will receive an email asking you to give your thoughts about the webinar. Just tell us what you thought. If you have any advice, write it, and we'll try to improve the presentation, talk about specific topics you want to know about. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.